last night was just one, so it's cool to have the dual going on here. I'm the fourth presentation doing Inner West Side. This one will incorporate Edgewood a little bit, just because that's where I went to school for elementary, middle school, and high school. And, all right, let's get this going. Okay, so, oh, clicker, where's clicker? Is clicker working? Yeah. All right, well, water. So this is like the most minimalist presentation I'll ever make PowerPoint-wise, because I don't really want to push a lot of words, and that's the whole point, right? No words or less words. As I was growing up, and I'm going to walk around, I don't want to stay stationary. As I was growing up, the thing that I was always told by my parents and my brother, because it was just the four of us in the house, don't drink the water. Water is sucia, agua es sucia. The water is dirty. And as a kid, as you're growing up, you really can't understand, what do you mean it's dirty? What do you mean it's dirty water? But the reality was, as I grew up as a teenager, it was still something that we just used those pure filters that we connect to the faucets. Because that's just what we used in those Brita pitcher things. That was life. I really didn't think much of it. It was until 5 years ago, when I was at Texas A&M San Antonio, I had to take a social issues class, so I picked environmental racism. I was just, oh, that sounds like an interesting topic, you know, environmental racism. There I went down some rabbit holes. Those very interesting researchy rabbit holes that led me down to the realization that environmental racism exists in my neighborhood. Does anybody, raise your hand if you know what a Superfund site is? Superfund. Not fun, it's not a fun thing, no. Fun, but Superfund. Basically, the EPA designates a site that is determined toxic and unlivable Superfund. What happened was, as I was growing up and as I figured out and I connected the dots, like, oh, this is why the water's dirty. And from the 50s through 2000, the Kelly Air Force Base, now the Kelly Air Force Base doesn't exist anymore, but it was dumping chemicals known as TCE and PCE, chemicals that were used to ungrease planes. Now, to put in context here, in North Carolina and Oregon, this similar action happened, where what is acceptable for TCE and PCE to consume in a sense of water, it should be only 1 to 5 parts per billion. But in Oregon and North Carolina, they found that it was 1,600 times parts per billion. Now, when you put it in context of Edgewood, you're thinking, well, so it should be a Superfund site, right? What's those 22,000 homes around Kelly Air Force Base? The reality is it wasn't. This is where the tragedy begins. This is where we start painting this wonderful, beautifully dark picture. That TCE and PCE ended up in the water, so what's the result of this? High liver cancer rates, kidney cancer rates, in the sense of lung cancer rates because of the fumes that would come up from this, over between 5 to 10 times the average rate of what's in San Antonio. So this is what we're dealing with here. Now you're thinking, so how was it not considered a Superfund site? Well, the EPA, in conjunction with the state, in conjunction with Metro Health, yes, made sure that it didn't happen, because if it had been designated a Superfund site, the residents, those 22,000 homes, and probably including my own, would have actually gotten money to hire our own scientists and our own lawyers to fight that. That is exactly why they didn't want that to happen. Granted, the Air Force, they put some money into trying to clean it up. Guess how much the residents got from the Air Force from this?
Oh, hello.
Hello? Right back at you. The residents only got $1 million from this. That is the tragedy behind this. That is the tragedy behind environmental racism in Edgewood and in the Inner West Side. So, not just inequities with water, but also with redlining. Over hundreds of years where you had Mexican Americans stuck in the Inner West Side with no other place out because you couldn't move north of Culebra because it was only designated for white people. Up until 1977, when it was determined, oh, that's illegal. Oh, then people could finally move out of the area. But that's where people were stuck, in the same sense of not receiving funds. So Robin Hood exists in the context, as Caitlin knows, Robin Hood exists where we get money from more, wealthy districts, but it's far from perfect. As the realities of Edgewood and many inner city districts we don't have enough resources for our kids. And that is the truth of it. So it's gotten to the point now where you see inner city districts, like I say, is the South Sand, Edgewood, where people don't want to move to those parts of town because the first thing you think about when you got new family, you got kids, you're like, well, how's the schools? How are the schools? Nobody wants to move their kids to a district that gets Fs every single year or has been taken over by the TEA. That is the reality. So over the last 20 years, Edgewood's student population has decreased over 40%. Nobody wants to live there anymore. And it's gotten to the point where myself, as a resident that's lived there all my life, all 27 years, I've even questioned whether I would put my kids in Edgewood if I had kids. And that breaks my heart, because it's like, I went to school here. That's my home. But even then, it's like, I question if it's the right place or not. So, those are the realities, but there's some positive here. There is some strengths here. So, as I mentioned, 40% decreased population. So there were a lot of schools that got closed in Edgewood in the midst of this, right? Yes, quite a couple. But this is where we kind of reverse this a little bit. There is hope. Introducing the Westside Education and Training Center. Has anybody heard of this place? No? Maybe a couple of nods, cool. This was founded back in 2005. And I met the man who actually was one of the 3 people who started WETC. His name was Manuel Diaz Garza. Awesome human being. He got me my first job doing political campaigning for local campaigns and stuff. He believed in me, which I'm indebted to because I needed that, because I had no self-esteem back in that time. But his mindset, even then as a 16-year-old kid, when I heard about this from him, he's like, yeah, what we did is we transformed an abandoned school in Edgewood into a college. And I'm like, wait, what? How'd you do that? How'd they do that? How can you do something that goes from abandoned to something that's functional? My brain couldn't process that as a 16-year-old. Still, as a 27-year-old, I still have trouble processing that. But it happened. And the reality is with WETC, over 10 years now, and about to receive its brand new building, a state-of-the-art facility, it has served, guess how many students since then? 13,000 students. Imagine, those 13,000 might have ended up in some trade school that would have been ripping them off right now. Really. And so, they'll receive nursing assistant training, which has led a lot of them to getting their RNs, networking assistants, who have eventually gotten their bachelor's in IT, and same with arts. So that's why I want to mention the art piece with the printing shop that they've got in there now. Because I was also a student at WETC 5 years ago when I did an AmeriCorps term. This, 5 years ago, did not exist. This was an abandoned basketball gym, and I love basketball, but it looked really creepy in there. This is now the printed era. This is a print shop that exists in there now, that people of Edgewood students and community members are using and utilizing. And it's beautiful to see how we've gotten to this point, even with WETC. So I included some photos here. And this is now what's inside WETC in the main lobby. Photos that are indicative of really what the West Side is, and its culture and its art. And the pews, you can see the pews, how they're colored. Granted, you're not allowed to sit on them, obviously. But it's a very beautiful thing to witness. And 5 years ago, yeah, the lobby was really bland and looking, and it was just like, oh, okay. Like, it did look like an abandoned school that was transformed into a college, sort of. But now it really looks like a place that holds its own. So, that leads us to what is the dream for Edgewood ISD, the West Side and beyond. And I'll start in this point. Now, yesterday I was doing some additional research bits, and I had to look at the Stone Oak zip code. So I picked one of the Stone Oak zip codes. Take a guess what the percentages of people who know Spanish in like the Stone Oak area. Throw a number.
It's 20, 15%.
15? You saying 15?
5%. I said 15.
Callie?
I said 4.
4?
Oh.
Okay, it's 20%.
Oh.
I know, a little higher, right? Yeah. Shooting low, go high, yeah. Guess what it is in Edgewood?
95%. 97 or 98.
Oh yeah, that's the,
95.
a little high.
70.
70.
Oh.
Not bad. So it goes to show you where can that strength be utilized, right? It's utilizing the fact that people who know 2 languages, that is being bilingual, that is the stuff that gets people jobs. So I think when you think about working with clients who are bilingual, always make sure to emphasize the fact that they can get more money than someone that's just monolingual. Is that the way to say it, I guess?
Mhm.
That's always something to keep in mind for businesses and for jobs that need that. So never forget that. So what is the dream? I think the dream is, first of all, not being fearful of the water that I drink. That's the first. I don't know if that'll change anytime soon, but that's definitely a dream. Second dream would be the inner city schools and districts not being seen as outcasts in comparison to more wealthier districts that we're seeing nowadays, especially where everybody's moving outward, not inward anymore. The third would be seeing WETC not just as a singular success and within an inner city, seeing WETC as a success outside, not just in Texas, within Houston or Dallas or Fort Worth, but in other inner cities across the country. And lastly, I think the last dream would be actually having social workers in schools. Caitlin's like, yeah, we need that. Policies. Policies. And so right now in Edgewood, we've got 1 social worker at Memorial High School and 1 social worker at Kennedy for over 2,500 students. How does that make sense? That's not sustainable. I'm sorry. It's just like, think about the caseload there. I would not want to be that social worker. Sorry. So that's something that needs to change. Maybe something where you have an equal amount of social workers to counselors. And since we see nowadays counselors are just more guidance counselors, maybe having the role shift where actually social workers are doing what they're supposed to be doing in schools and counselors as well. And I will leave you with that. Thank you very much.